This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. It is the Utility Committee meeting between the City of Lake Stevens and the Lake Stevens Sewer District for March 22nd, 2022. At 4 p.m., the Board of Commission is present. All three commissioners, Commissioner Koshi, Commissioner Wright, Commissioner Martin. And now that we've opened it, we also have some staff here present. But I'll turn the meeting over to the city department. They are the ones hosting the meeting this year. So I will look to the chair.
Great. Can we do roll call? First, doing roll call. So it looks like the only one we do not have here would be Brett Gailey from the city. Is that correct? Do we need a motion to excuse that? Probably not.
We can make one. We don't necessarily need one. I mean,
Do we need to, I don't see it on here, but do we ever do the flag salute?
We have never done it. Sometimes we just do it. We can. There's no.
I prefer to do the flag, so why we do it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, so we got roll call. I don't know if we need a motion to.
I'll make a motion. We excuse Mayor Gailey from this meeting as he's had prior business he had to attend.
With him gone, do we have a quorum?
Yes.
We did.
Yeah.
So we need minimum two from each side.
Correct. Okay. Okay, so with that being said, there was a motion. Do I have a second to excuse?
I'll second it.
Second.
First, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, great. So I think we've got that. We've got an agenda. Let's go to the public forum. Is there anyone here on the public forum who would like to speak to this utility committee today? Doesn't look like there's anyone here. Going to ask for a first and second. Still no one? Okay, great. Looks like we're good to go there. Let's get into the project review. Starting under A, sewer rate study, in-depth discussion.
So I know that at one of our last meetings, we had kind of spoken about the how the rates and some of the things came about as far as not just rates, but we were also talking, I think, downtown when we were looking at the Hartford and the Machias area. And I think some questions went around in regards to where did those dollars come with, how did it extrapolate into like $15 million eventually? And so I know that since we put something together, we kind of have some discussion, and I worked with staff to kind of say, hey, let's talk this, because I know, well, we have an hour, it seems to go by faster than we seem to be able to get to it. So I know that staff had put that together so we can all ask questions and kind of go from there and hopefully answer a lot that everybody had.
Can we step back a year and a half or so, though, 2 years? Because I haven't dug back in my notes, but didn't Gray and Osborne do some of this work about 2 years ago as to trying to get your arms around what's going to be needed in the next 20 years?
Yeah, the scope was limited. It was part of our comprehensive plan,
Right.
and it was limited to 2 small sections. It wasn't going to serve the entire area, just predominantly the northeast corner of the UGA and a small section by Evergreen. Basically, it would connect Hartford through an easement through Evergreen's parcel and get back to the collection system there.
So they just specifically looked at that portion of it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Why wouldn't the discussion at that time, I'm just curious, been to service the whole area and service that whole area through there?
Well, I think those 2 were the top priority from city staff when we were discussing, when we met with them, when we were going through our comp planning process, as the 2 areas most likely to develop in the near term. And then any future projects were essentially, they were deemed donated facilities, so developer would construct them and then donate them to the district.
So the city's position at that time was, here's the 2 areas that we want service.
Mhm.
And so Gray and Osborne took those things and plugged it into your existing comprehensive plan, right?
Yeah, and it was David Evans and Associates at that time, so Rodney's.
Rodney, when he moved
Yep.
over there. Okay. So with that, Rodney recalculated the GFCs and the upcoming capital expenditures, correct? Which was at whatever level, and now we've come back with FCS 2 years later and reanalyzed all this stuff,
Mhm.
and now it's up here.
Well, FCS did the rate analysis then too, or the GFC analysis. They subcontracted with Rodney's firm.
Okay.
But the scope of the project at the city's request changed to make the serving the entire area capital project. No donated facilities
In Hartford.
in Hartford. So the onus of financing that is now on Future Connections rather than the developer building and then getting latecomers from it.
Future connections of the entire system, not just that isolated area. I mean, it just seems like, I mean, we were looking at some numbers down here and all of a sudden now we're way up here.
Mhm.
And, you know, I guess the question is, how do we go from here to there in such a short period of time? And I mean, granted, we're all talking about gas increase and so forth and pipe increase, things of that sort, but, you know, with the exception of gas, concrete, piping, labor hasn't tripled in the last 2 years. So I guess that's a mystery to me as to why I asked for this kind of deep dive as to how in the heck are we getting here with these, talking about potentially $114 per month, $112, whatever the number is, steady, moderate, or aggressive. And yeah, so I guess we're kind of at a loss as to sitting on the outside of this, so.
I'm confused. Are we still talking about Hartford and what changed in Hartford, or are we now shifting to have a conversation more broadly about rates in the increase?
Broadly about rates, that
Okay,
not only Hartford changed.
just so I understand, is the question and regarding to Hartford, is that nailed down? The requirements changed. It wasn't built in. It's now built in. Request of the city. Is that portion of it clear?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, you asked the question originally, Gary. There was some confusion about how Hartford changed from what it was to what it is in the current plan. And I just want to make sure, do we have that nailed down or do we need to have some additional discussion? I'm happy to go to the rate discussion, but is that part of it clear? Or is there additional work we can do to clarify the Hartford specific piece of your question?
Well, my understanding is that originally, when we talked about Hartford, there was a main trunk line going up Hartford Road. It was about 4.5 million, didn't do what the city wanted. So the line got moved to the east to the toe of the slope. Is that about right?
That's essentially, that would be the lowest cost place to be able to serve the most property is to move it out of Hartford.
To the east, to the toe of the slope. And with that, everything ballooned to 13 million.
No, it's just the scope of the project. So the city requested that we serve all of Hartford all the way down to 20th. And before it was just a half-mile section, and now we're looking at the entirety of.
That's why I was asking. I was like, so the city is the one who queued,
Okay,
supposedly the
that
first.
makes sense.
Yes.
then. Okay. All right. Okay, so yes, that we're clear.
Okay, cool. So then to go on to the rate discussion, do you want to I mean, I can give you the abbreviated answer to your question in terms of why rates have changed. I mean, we went through some of that last time, but the net is, or the short version would be no rate increase over 5 years. In 2021, CPI went up over 7%. You can debate which index you want to look at, but if you pick CPI, it's over 7%. And what we've done, we've gone off and done some work, and I think it'll be reflective in the PowerPoint we got queued up. But we've come back to an aggressive plan or an in-between plan. We're now considering, and we wanted to share, a two-step increase a certain amount, which hopefully takes us through the next 5 years, which is consistent with the kind of the guiding principles we shared last time, and then target an amount based on today's data, the best we can, of what we think that second step will be 4 or 5 years afterwards. And so it really gives a rate picture based on course and speed and all the caveats associated with it, but it gives a rate picture and a rate strategy from now all the way to the time when the district merges with the city. So I think that's what we have queued up. But the short version is no 5 years, 7% CPI last year, and we're actually the midpoint we're talking about is about a 15% increase. And given those two things, the 5 years and the 7.2 just last year, I think I have no problem defending it.
And I think part of the rate structure, when you guys have seen some stuff that we put out from a steady to aggressive and then yet in between, was we looked at a long picture thinking, okay, what are the capital needs, not just for here, but the entire area. And that's where that $38 million budget came into play. It was how we were going to tackle that. Were we going to tackle it? Because I think, as you know, the board's ideology was always kind of, let's try to give the district to the city at the end of this ILA debt-free, or as close to debt-free as you could. We tried to do that, but we knew that going into it, because we're losing buildable lands, obviously, there's no more development. Now that capital has to come somewhere, so it's got to be built into the rate structure to be able to do that, because the county's restricted the city's growth and everything else. Well, to minimize that, because nobody wants to go out, I mean, if we went out tomorrow, we would need the permission from the city to be able to borrow $38 million if we're going to say we're building all of this tomorrow, because there has to be an agreement, because it would extend beyond that 2033 timeframe, and you have to be a part of that. Any financing beyond that, you know, there has to be agreement between both parties, because you inherit whatever we put together. So we were trying to look at how do we keep it without having so much debt, because everybody's taking on debt. I know the city's had to take on some debts to complete projects. It's great to have some debt, but when you're at your max limit, we're all going to be in trouble, I think, eventually. So we were just looking at rate structures. I asked the general manager, said, give me the worst case scenario from the bottom. I was a little more aggressive, because I looked at it, if I could turn this place over at 2033 and not have a dollar owed in additional debt, that was it. But to jump $26 tomorrow, they'd probably be out front throwing rocks through our windows. So we had to kind of look at the different ones where we could make a difference. What really comes into play is that step we want to do in this area, where we made an agreement with the city to plan for that area for those capital upgrades, is going to be the first half. So if you look at the moderate, those dollars going in there plan for that, you know, those dollars going into ready to plan for those infrastructure needs in the ground. The other thing we also had to take a look at that we have discussion about, is like we introduced once before, was the Department of Ecology has this magic little idea of what they think that is going to take for these districts to be able to meet the nutrients or discharge requirements. The study alone is probably, you know, as far as just to get there to identify, is probably about $750,000 just for somebody to tell us that this is what you need to do. The actual fix is going to be millions of dollars. And I know when I was speaking with my fellow commissioners, our workshop, I was feeling more comfortable if we can get money in the bank, because what I don't want to have come down the line by 2025, and when we're all supposed to start moving on this thing, is we don't have any money to move forward on that. And your DOE is pretty much tied to our permits, and we have to have money to be able to fund whatever fix is going to be needed at the plant to discharge in the slough and be in requirements without being fined all the time. So it's become a big issue, but we don't know the exact price tag. And I can guarantee it's probably going to be over $3 or $4 million at least. And so it's kind of looked like, how do we get ahead of the curve a little bit? How do we also make sure that we got the commitments that we had said we would do down in this area with the city? And meet all those things. And that's why I had asked for a very aggressive approach, because I was really looking at it from the standpoint, there's a lot of things in the next 12 years that could come into play that none of us have control over. And we have to be able to have funds somehow to be able to meet those challenges, because I think that as the general manager and our WASWAD, which is the district's statewide, you know, I mean, the association that looks for wastewater and water, it's not going to stop at nutrients. It's going to go to carbons and everything else in the water, because we're just moving that way. They weren't successful in voting a carbon tax in years ago, so they're coming at us all another way. And so we're going to have to plan for that somehow, because there can only be so much discharge, and they're just going to put it into these permits that these sewer district, wastewater districts are required to meet. And so That's the scary unknown for us. And that's why I asked staff to kind of go that way. Costs are increasing. I think when we extrapolate just some of the numbers with certain percentages as a guess, because, you know, it's hard to get a hard fast number 8 years from now. We all know that, but we're trying to at least get the best possible information there. So that's where we've kind of hit it. And I know that $26, and I know my fellow commissioners are looking at me like, would you hit your head coming in? Because they're not in favor of it. But I'm just trying to look at us to get ourselves ahead of this curve, because I don't know if the city, let's say 5 years ago, do you want to take on a $21 million bill to just have to fund some things? That's not going to be, I don't think the city's going to want to do that all of a sudden. Whereas if we started early and tried to get some of these rates adjusted up, we have some money to play with in the bank to be able to meet some of the needs.
Is all your existing debt service to be paid off by 2033?
Pretty much, yes.
All-
63?
It's all but two of the Public Works Trust Fund loans that the city and District went to Olympia to try and extend past that tape. Otherwise, it would have all been paid off by 2033.
What is it, 63 million right now or something like that?
I don't
It's,
have that number right
yeah,
off the top.
Somewhere or give me
Yeah,
5 million.
Yeah, we were doing quite well trying to pay down. Because at that time, remember, we were having a discussion about a year ago about the 2025 and if the lift station, that certain populations we had to grow for that phase 2, but we knew we weren't going to meet that. Well, guess what's replaced it? This and DOE. That's the sad part about it.
You should, I know we have some slides, we got some slides prepared. Should we step through those and just, because maybe some of the questions and some of the things we're bantering around might just get answered and nailed down there.
All right. Here we go. So I just wanted to start with kind of a basic foundation for us. This was presented on January 27th. It's just the budget for 2022. The district basically has two funds, the operating fund and the capital fund. Operating fund almost entirely comes from rates. There's a little bit of interest. There's about $3,000 from ULIDs and other fees and a little bit of rental income, but that's about $14.8 million that we expect to come in 2022. And then out of that operating fund is all of our O&M expenses and then all of our debt service. So debt service this year is supposed to be about 7.38. And then O&M we expect to be 8.24. That O&M expense is up about 11% since 2021. So that 11% really is coming from the increased costs in the aging system. Our capital fund is funded almost entirely out of GFCs. There's a tiny bit of interest that comes out of there, but GFCs, we are expecting this year about 179 connections, so which is about 1/3 of the existing DEs that we have. So 1.72 out of GFCs that we expect this year, and then we have planned just for 2022, 10.58 million in capital expenditures. So the question that we've been asking is, can anything from the rates be used to pay for some capital? Because that deficit is huge. And currently 0% comes from the rates. Here's 2017 projected out until about 2033 of what we expect operating fund expenditures to be. 2017 to 2021, there was a 30.7% increase. CPI during that same time, CPIU December to December was 17.3. So most of the drop-offs that you see there are a result of dropping off debt. The next one is the slide you've already seen, which is the green line being the expected expenses for capital, and then that reddish orange color being the expected revenue coming from capital. This assumes that we go up to the higher GSC in 2022, which is based on the CIP and the new comp plan, which would be going from 10,400 to 13,500. And again, based on the graph I showed you last time, that 2029, we expect no new connection. And that's really where we're saying, can anything from rates help with this deficit we know is coming? From the CIP, these are the projects that come out of Chapter 6 from the draft comp plan for right now. Again, there's the repair and replacement of 31 million, and then upgrade and expansion of 37 million. The majority of the repair and replacement is coming from that old pipes that we have. So we have 19.5 miles of pipe that is over 50 years old.
Is that this old red?
Yep,
That's all replacement?
that is all replacement. So those are what's highlighted on that map I showed you last time is entirely the stuff that's 50 years old or older. So that's 16 million in that project alone. The other component of that, there's about 12 million in that repair and replacement for the existing lift stations that we have that are obviously aging, just like the pipes are.
Are you confident you're going to be able to replace the pipes that are in the lake?
We're gonna have to. So I just talked with the vendor on Friday about a lining system that could work possibly, that they've done under other lake bodies. So I think there is something out there. Obviously, we haven't decided how to do it exactly, but I do think there's a way to get it done. And then, like I said last time, there are several projects that overlap between repair and replacement and upgrade and expansion. For example, like a lift station where we're increasing capacity, a portion of it gets attributed to the R&R and a portion gets attributed to the upgrade. So upgrade and expansion for this one, this is where we're talking about that Hartford area. This next slide is the one that I had shared with you earlier, Gary. These are the specific projects that are in that industrial area, which, like we said, the industrial area has expanded. The Hartford area has been in the comp plan for a long time. The 2007 comp plan had a number of projects equaling 5.32 million in the plan. So we've always, had some sort of plan going on with this one. But this is the latest to serve the entire area. There's one developer funded project that I didn't include on the list for you. 7 of them are district funded projects, and that's gone from the difference of developer funded and donated to now district funded. If we really do fund all of those projects, it really works out to be about $900 per an ERB. There is one additional project in Hartford Road that extends sewer to that final lot that does not have sewer on the west side of Hartford. And that is planned for 2029, but it's not on your list there.
This is kind of a crazy question, but since Hartford's been in the comp plan since 2007,
Yeah.
you've theoretically been collecting fees for that improvement since 2007, right?
So the way the GFC works is we can look 10 years ahead. So the only things that are slated for 10 years ahead can have a portion of the GFC collected. However, if the project itself does not move forward, say it's replaced by a different project or a project costs more than expected, then those funds are redispersed. So the fund isn't collected for a specific project, it's for whatever is in the plan.
Right, but through the comprehensive plan, you're outlining a number of projects in order to justify your GFCs. Right?
Yes.
And Hartford was included in that way back in 2007, yet nothing's been expended in that area, right? So theoretically, you were collecting money for that purpose, but it got reappropriated to other things. So I guess what I'm driving at is when you're looking for reasons as to why or how you can, I guess, take your monthly payment to pay for this capital facilities, right? It would seem to me that that's a reasonable explanation in the sense that we were doing this, collecting money for that purpose, but it went elsewhere for other capital projects. So, I mean, how much justification do you need to balance that out, I guess?
No, right. I mean, we have dollars that sit in there. I mean, years ago, like when we were doing the Southwest Interceptor, 20th Street Southeast, there was no money. It wasn't planned anytime. The only time that was going to be done was when the county was supposed to finish widening 20th Street Southeast. Recession time, 07, 08, in that time. The city had annexed it. The money had always been collected through all the pieces of the county because it was unincorporated county at the time, with the aspect that the county eventually was going to finish and complete it. Because all we had ever planned in that area was about a mile of pipe from 91st to 83rd was absent. The county told the city at that time, sorry, we're out, the money's gone, the project's yours, sorry, there's nothing to fund. Well, I remember, because I was part of the board for a short bit, and I also worked for the city, and the city said, we have to have that, we have to have that, we're never gonna try. We spent $1 million+ doing that project that wasn't, you know, it would have been a lot cheaper. If the county opened the road and we just dropped the pipe in and said, thank you, and walked away, but we had to do all of the work in there just to be able to complete a project. That is one of the aspects, like you said, the money's in there, but it gets reallocated because it was never going to be completed right away at the cost it ended up getting. So, I mean, now delays came because the county obviously wasn't able to complete it at any time when the costs were probably a little cheaper then, but then eventually they just were not able to do it because I know that the city ended up having to probably pay for the entire thing with federal dollars and everything else. I don't know if there was any county dollars ever expended because, as you know and I know, all the development that happened from the Trussell East through the city limits till you get to Williams Road, all those dollars probably didn't come to the city, or at least come back into the city like with the road improvements that the county collected at the time. They probably just said, we had to reallocate them, and at this point, we're just not going to. We don't
I think I think what Dan just shared is a good example of how capital gets reallocated to, you know, a higher order bid at some point. The other part of your question, Gary, was what's the, you know, what do we need to be able to, you know, make a call relative to shifting rate revenue to cover capital?
Right.
Nothing, really. I mean, there's not a process or an approval. It's really up to the commissioners to build a rate structure that accommodates the dual purpose of protecting ratepayers and protecting the environment. And, you know, there it is. I think it becomes problematic, though, to balance the ratepayer portion if we're going to say it's $900 per ERU to do Hartford. You know, that's a difficult, you know, when we pluck that one out, that's much more difficult to justify and look at a ratepayer in the eye and say that's what their dollars are specifically going to than, hey, there's 19 miles of pipe that are 50 years old and it causes an environmental risk and it's part of the existing system, and therefore the rate structure is going to have to step up to that because that's not an incremental piece that is frankly fair to burden development with because it's an existing system item. So it's that kind of trade-off, but the mechanism to be able to do it is commissioners approve it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, just keep moving on here. The repair and replacement of the wastewater treatment plant, which is chapter 7 of the draft comp plan, that's almost entirely for the membrane replacement, end of life that we're planning for those membranes. Upgrade and expansion, you'll notice we used to have quite a hefty phase 2 upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant, but based on the newest comp plan projections, we're not going to need that. So that upgrade and expansion is limited to things like alkalinity addition systems and UV systems. And then there were just a few other things that were in there, the upgrade on this building, the Vector truck, and comp plans and TIN reports that are required for ecology requirements. So that led us, we ran 3 models. A steady model, which just what is the bare minimum we can do to meet our O&M requirements. And then the opposite end of the bookend, a model to see what would it have to be so we could cover all of our CIP projects, but also take on no new debt. And that was getting it up to 112 a month, which would be about a 30% increase. And then somewhere in the middle. So the $99 increase, that would $4 towards the O&M costs, and then now adding $9 towards the pipe replacement project, or CIP. With everything staying in the CIP list, we would still have to do one additional rate increase in order to cover new oncoming debt that we would have to issue. So the aggressive one kind of came off the table after the last board workshop, but just an idea of, so where would your monthly rate go? These pie charts kind of show you, if we go with that steady, there's still 0% of your monthly rate that would go to capital. So it would be debt service 49% and O&M 51%. If we go with the moderate, the $99, which would be a 15% increase from the current $86 a month, you would get 5% of your monthly rate could go to capital expenses. And then it's 46 and 49 for debt service and O&M respectively. But those, again, are just assuming that we keep all of the same projects in the CIP as they are listed, not changing them over to donated or vice versa.
And I think the biggest one coming in front of us is obviously the Hartford tax line wise and everything. So the moderate really kind of plans for it. Otherwise, if you stay at the steady, we're going to get to that point, and then that's going to have to be taken in one full swoop. That is obviously going to be able to exceed the 2033 timeline, and that's going to be something that the city's got to sign off on for that plan.
And having the debt in 2027, I mean, essentially, it pushes the conversation a bit, right? Because we're going to do Hartford out that time, and we're going to do debt, which is just a delayed way of putting on the ratepayer, right? It just stretches that over a longer period of time, but it's still a ratepayer funded activity. We get to that point, and then it's a question of, do we feel it's reasonable to take on debt on the district for Hartford and have the ratepayers fund that 100%? And you know, we get into it then, but that's the purpose of a big piece of that debt that's there in 2027. It postpones the conversation, leaves Hartford in, but how we're saying it, it's going to be funded with debt. We have the conversation then whether we want to pull the trigger, whether it's justified, whether all those things. If that is helpful.
Have you looked at all as far as treating Hartford as a separate utility area?
In the past, we have, but it doesn't serve very many parcels, and it becomes a large burden. We need 60% signatures to get a unit in that area. And then it's a 20-year assessment on their property taxes for the full amount.
And your biggest property owner down there already runs a semi-treatment plant. And I don't know if he'd be on board with, or they would be on board in that context.
And I think we looked at it several times, and you've got about 20 parcels in that area that would be picking up a roughly $13 million bill in property assessments over 20 years. And that would be it.
So you provided a lift station and mainline trunk line? No laterals, right?
We would stub out off of the trunk line. We would stub a lateral out to those parcels.
Just to the property line?
Yeah, just to the edge of right away.
That's $13 million.
It's the lift stations, essentially, yeah.
And then the ongoing maintenance of the lift stations.
I mean, the one that we did, the regional one down at Machias Cutoff was, yeah, almost $6 million by the time.
Hey, one way to look at it, I guess, would be if we come, let's say we don't take on the debt to do Hartford in 2027, and the district merges with the city in 2033 or sometime before or whatever, and it's nearly debt free. If you go back to Mariah's chart that showed what the free cash flow ends up looking like as that debt falls off, I mean, the city ends up sitting there, I think if I looked at the numbers correctly, you end up sitting at that point with about $3 million a year of free cash flow. So that would be a lot easier conversation if that's a high priority to take that cash flow and pump it into Hartford. Now there's still the ratepayer, here's what we're using the money for conversation. But as far as not taking on debt and you have the cash flow, you don't have to raise rates at that time to be able to do that. If that's really the highest order bid, there would be that option for the city. And even if that's doesn't make sense or whatever, I think it's important to note that the free cash flow at that time that debt drops off is significant. And I think that's important. I mean, that's what we're striving for relative to having the district in a position when it comes into the city to just be the strongest financially structured entity potentially ever in Washington state that's been handed over, as far at least from a debt structure standpoint, and investing in infrastructure. We aren't starving infrastructure just to eke it over the line, but to have it done right.
That's the big conversation on the table, so I know.
Why are you guys so gracious of that?
Well, I mean, I think.
I mean, seriously, is that a good operating model to turn over an ongoing entity with no debt service, yet we've sacrificed potentially providing some service to other areas? I mean, is that a reasonable business plan?
Short answer from this gets into, I think, philosophy, both corporate, municipal, and personal. But the short answer from my perspective is yes. And again, it comes back to how do you balance the environment, our mission, right? Balance the environment with the ratepayer. What is that? And there's natural tension there. And the expansion part of the system piece is, the district's philosophy has been development pays for development in that. Now, Hartford is largely an investment and they will come. And that's a valid philosophy too. It's just who bears the cost of that and when do they bear the cost of that? So if the expanding the system piece of it, those questions we just, one has to grapple with.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I mean, and I think that's how a lot of the special purpose districts have operated in Washington state. I mean, I came from the fire side where, we operate, it's easier for a district to operate, meaning a special purpose district, because we have one sole function. I don't envy the city at all. I don't envy the fact that you guys got to do for planning, parks, police, public works. I mean, you've got a lot of hands at the table to do that. So you're looking at a debt structure a lot differently than we would look from ours. I mean, for us, it has been in the sewer district, really. I think as Kevin had mentioned, it pays for itself. It's hard to, it was a big risk at the time when myself, Commissioner Woods, and Commissioner Kirk were on the board for the Southwest Interceptor, because there was a lot of pushback that, in the board, do we fund this? Because it was the model, build it and they will come. Because I know at that time the city was really entertaining a box store, which was Costco at the time, to say, hey, look at us, and this and that. And realizing that in order to attract businesses like that, because the model had changed, it was no longer you had area for a business and they came in and spent the money. You had to entice them. You had to put facilities in. I mean, there was a lot of debate at that time over pump stations and the pumps and everything else, because we all know the topography of Costco is that South Lake Stevens Road definitely flew that way as far as gravity. So it was trying to get it to the station at 91st and 20th, or however we were going to route it. So we took that leap of faith at that time because we were like, okay, we're going to put it in there. And I mean, to this day, it's just now coming to fruition. I mean, it actually isn't pumping yet, but having that Southwest interstate, it did help us, don't get me wrong, because we needed to be able to have eventually a straight shot to the plant. But it's a different philosophy at times. And that's what we're just really looking. I mean, we kicked it around in the year or so as a board. Do we just not care and just say, when the city takes it, and they get what they want? You know, I mean, they not derogatory like that, it's yours, but we wanted to pay debt down. We want to be responsive in that aspect. I mean, we could take on more debt or do some of the stuff at different times if we want to keep rates and then just go up. But I think part of some of it, we didn't feel the comfortable ease of all of this was the previous administration. We couldn't even refinance anything without being held over a barrel for a short while there. There was just a lot of friction to even extend. So it was like, well, if we can't do that, what's it going to be like to try to go and say, hey, we got to borrow $20 million in 5 years to do this project? Are you guys going to be on board to want to do that? Because it's going to take, it takes both financials. It takes the financials of the district, the financials of the cities to be able to get it to the bond holders and, you know, say, okay, we're comfortable with the model. So we were just looking at, like, how can we put it in the rates, get enough capital? Because tell you the truth, I think we were all led to believe in 1991 and the late 80s that this Growth Management Act was going to give us 20 years to grow, and then the next 20 years was going to be double our size, and we would all be fat and happy and moving on, because we fought in the early days over SR9 and 2, I mean, and Highway 2 with Snohomish on buildable lands. And then all of a sudden here, now we fast forward, counties, states pretty much told everybody, yeah, now you know what it's like to want. None of you are getting expansions. And that puts a big dent into the plans of what the city was planning for. And what the district kind of looked at is, because look what the model was built on in order to pay the debt to take the plant on. We were expecting growth to occur every year until at least 2033 when we paid it off.
I would say 5 years ago it was evident that they weren't going to do any UGA expansion.
You guys have been more on top, right?
That was coming. They kept trying to act like we had lots of buildable lands.
Right.
And they've been filling that same report out the same way for the last 8 years, for that matter.
Yeah.
So.
But it's just taking it on. How do we want, excuse me, present it to, how do we want to take it into with our ratepayers? You know, do we include?
Another thing I'd offer is that as long as we're in a legal tussle, I can't imagine bond issuance happening, period, in stop. No one's going to touch it. So, you know, we got to have that, that resolved also. Otherwise, debt isn't even an option on the table.
We're like that geopolitical issue going on the other side of the world right now, that nobody's going to buy bonds from a certain country because they're poison. But I guess what we were looking at is if we did raise the rates, we could build it in that way and get to the goal that we're trying to accomplish. But if we're not going to take it as the most aggressive, which there does not seem to be a support to do that, then if it's a moderate or moderate's really our only answer to be able to try to get them. Because it's not going to be a happy scene in a couple of years if we go steady and you guys come to the table and say, okay, we're ready to put pipe in the ground, and we tell you, well, there's no money.
That's
That's
why turning something over with no debt is nice in theory, but
no,
you've got to have the infrastructure.
No, absolutely. But I think that taking it with a rate increase and putting money into the capital to get us there lessens the burden. Because if we decide right now, saying, you know what, we could run this thing out to 2033 with no rate increases, the burden all of a sudden is on the city, because then you're further behind the 8 ball. Because
It's not on the city, it's on the ratepayers.
Well, it's on the ratepayers, but if the city takes it over, that's all the people are going to be looking at.
No, exactly.
But our philosophy is not to do it that way. What we don't want to be doing, at least I can speak for myself, and I know Commissioner Koshi has said it before, so we're kind of there. I know Commissioner Wright's brand new, and she probably thinks that way, but I don't want to speak for her. Is I don't want to burden the city with just, here you go, good luck. I'm
Well, that
out.
was the whole purpose of the agreement of the utility committee, to have all the,
Have conversation.
sit down and have equal seat at the table. So, but we'll figure that part of it out.
Mhm.
Is there any more topic on this tonight? Because otherwise we're gonna
I know.
go for an hour and a half talking about rate structure. And
Well, I know that Councilmember Peter Shaken really wanted to go in depth, and I saw emails, and I want to make sure that is getting us close, because I know we're.
I'd like some feedback. So this is the second round. We've provided a lot of data. A lot of the data this time is the same as it was a month ago. We're narrowing in on a moderate consideration. We haven't made a decision there. I would welcome I guess I'd like some feedback on the moderate. I'd like some feedback on if you got a different philosophy that you would like, to offer up. I would like to understand a little bit more about, if Hartford is Hartford something the city would be comfortable, going to the ratepayers and saying, hey, it's $900 in ERU. This is important for these reasons. And this is the justification around why this part of your rate structure is going to build out infrastructure at Hartford. Here's how it's going to return benefit back to you as a ratepayer. Give us a little feedback on it, because this is kind of the second round where it's been mostly one way.
Well, I don't think it's in our best interest or the sewer districts to deliver a sewer district to the city with no debt. Just from standpoint of debt is good sometimes. And if we're sacrificing capital facilities for the purpose of paying all this debt down to deliver a district that's debt free, I don't think that's a good business plan. So I think as far as the Hartford deal, and Gene and Marcus know this, but my hope is that the city reevaluate that entire area. And, I've said, we're not getting any UGA increase expansion, so Hartford is our UGA expansion area, and we need to, density is a bad word in some people's minds, but I think it needs to be densified big time, and that's the only way it's going to pay for it. Because you're right, Kevin, I don't think it's fair for the existing ratepayer to be burdened with a huge cost. I think there's some cost there because, as I said, Hartford was in your CIP or your capital improvement program. Funds were diverted other places. It didn't happen. And now we are, 15 years later, and the costs are 5 times of what it would have been. So, there's this and that going on.
I'm not sure that the design for Hartford is, Gene had mentioned there might be some ulterior designs for Hartford, and I don't know what the cost difference would be there as well. Gene, am I wrong with that?
My concerns with Hartford is just that whatever we put in, it serves all the properties. And as long as it serves all the properties, we've met our goal.
So I think the moderate, so great feedback, and I appreciate that. And given the UJ situations, that makes complete sense. I think the moderate allows for that. We can move the project up. It's just we need to get happy with the debt piece of it, right? And a large part of that debt is targeted at Hartford. And so I think while we go through and the city does, on your side, reevaluates how to get the maximum value for the community and the city out of that piece of property, let's leave it's in the capital plan. It stays in the capital plan. We identify it as a debt related infrastructure project. It then provides the city an opportunity, because even if the ratepayer pays for part of the debt, until the city, until that it drops off, the city then could take other revenue sources that result from the Hartford development and take the burden off the ratepayer for, when that happens. So I'd say we leave it in. Moderate plan accommodates that. It would be funded via debt. We can talk about the time frame of when that debt would happen. It's currently slated in there at 2027, but it leaves our options on both sides open to be able to navigate that issue and still move forward with a rate structure and a rate philosophy that's consistent with what's been shared. That's where I'm kind of exiting this. I'm trying to, Marcus, I'm trying to do a wrap up here to get, but that's where I'm at relative to the conversation and kind of exiting the conversation. If that causes offense to anybody, let me know, or if that's okay, that would be great too.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I would hope that we could do it a little bit sooner than 2027, but here it is, 22, 3 years. I don't know. I mean, the city side, we got to get our act together as far as planning Hartford. I don't, seems, my opinion, we're kind of dragging our feet on it, but hopefully we can speed our side of things up a little
Well,
bit.
yeah, and Gary, just given where the debt, where the rates are and so forth relative to cost of debt and so forth, I'd rather lock in a known sooner than later too, just from a, financial standpoint. So anyway, okay, good. I appreciate it.
Great, is that enough about the sewer rate study? Let's go to accessory dwelling units. We have about 10 minutes. Okay.
I would
Or that.
suggest that since Russ isn't here, that we can push that one off to the next
Yeah, he
time.
was supposed to provide some information as to the number of properties potential and things like that.
It always seems very low when he talks about the number, just for the sake of saying. I mean, whenever we ask him how many potential properties, it's always like the number's very low. But of course, we can wait for Russ here to address it. Yeah.
And I think the bigger conversations about, we're seeing a lot of creative infill cabanas that would technically meet both of our definitions of accessory dwellings, but for shoreline and stuff wouldn't be permissible. So we've had a couple situations where technically meet the definition of an ADU, and where they paid connection fees like an ADU and later were not able to be inhabited or occupiable. So kind of puts us in a lurch. So just kind of agreeing on the definition or hearing the city's definition to make sure that ours matches would be super helpful.
We'll put that on next month's agenda. On to the action items. Can I get approval of the meeting minutes for February 22nd? Has everyone had a chance to review those?
I make a motion to approve them.
Second.
It's been first and second, all in favor, or any discussion? Any changes, any edits for the meeting? Nope, great. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes? Any opposed? Nope. That takes care of that. Let's talk about our next meeting. Is there any topics for the next meeting that we want to bring up? Maybe rate study again?
It might be more in depth. I'm okay with it. I mean, saying the truth, I think it's a good conversation there because we have a lot of things in front of us that are all building on what's occurring.
I think the city needs to maybe have a little bit of a meeting before the next time, so that way we can kind of look at things too. So that way we can be a little bit more, yeah, Hartford, yeah, like you're saying, Gary, is get our arms around it a little bit more. So that way we can weigh in. I mean, Hartford's kind of we have some general plans, but I think we have a lot of unknowns that we need to look at there.
When are you looking to institute or make a decision on your rate
On
structure?
rate, well, it'll probably about June is what we were kind of talking if we were going to do something and take action for us. We obviously want to have an open house for the public to weigh in too, because, well, the ratepayers are the ones that are going to have to, but.
So are you, just so I'm understanding, you're not immediately jumping to 99, you're.
Well, there's support for a moderate. So we went into a workshop just to kick the can around to see how everybody felt. And we were absolutely divided on for each, one on each. So the aggressive went out the window. The only two that survived were steady and moderate. And so it's something to take a look at because we were trying to base the model if we went here and had to take on debt for there to be able to meet some of those requirements.
So just, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say timing wise, it's the last component holding up the comp plan. We have to have this in order to finish that chapter. So for Thursday's board meeting, I have a resolution proposed for the board to consider. And then either way, whatever dollar amount is chosen, we're hoping for a June 1st effective date.
Part of it really comes down to is we do need to start planning for not only the Hartford area, but
Well, you guys are bringing this Thursday, right, for the approval of the rate study? So it doesn't really make sense for us to even meet about it. You guys are moving on this on Thursday with the moderate plan, correct?
It'll be in the agenda.
it'll be in the agenda. We don't know if it's going to be approved at that time, if we have enough to carry and do that. What we were trying to do is get an understanding of, hey, are we close to it? Are we there? Are we still off base?
Great. So when are we gonna do our next meeting?
I did receive an email. He's gonna pop in.
Hey, thank you. It's kind of problematic on the city side to have the meeting at this time because we're prepping for the council meeting at 6 o'clock. And so that's why Kelly had to run. She's got to go prep the mill, set everything up. And we don't do that till 4 o'clock every Tuesday because the facilities are used by other people typically. And so we wanted to propose a different day, if at all possible. But certainly it's up to the board and we're willing to work with whatever.
What if we went to a Wednesday versus,
I'm good for Wednesday.
yeah, Wednesday?
You good for Wednesday?
Hump day is great.
Wednesday's great.
Wednesday it is.
Does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
Same time, 4 o'clock.
Great.
So we're Monday. So instead of the,
It'd be the 27th if I'm correct. Am I correct? Oh, wait, I can't remember what, do we do the?
Yeah, I think that's right. 27th of April.
okay. Do we have anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn? Anyone? Anyone online? No? Great. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I mean, motion we adjourn.
Okay, so second on that?
I'll second it.
So it's been first and seconded. All in favor of adjourning the utility committee? Yes. Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Great. So that would end the utility, so it turns back to.
Okay, so the Board of Commissioners are back in their regular session. I'd entertain a motion if we want to adjourn our meeting. But you want to stay on, Kevin?
I'll make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
It has been seconded. All in favor?
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good council meeting, guys. Take care.
Thank you.